Hi, I'm Dr. Don Bonner with Personalized Wellness, and in this welcoming packet that I'm putting together for new patients, this is basically the second video. I want every patient to watch this video and prior to their consult, so they'll have an idea of where I'm coming from when it comes to diet and nutrition. As you see here, I put diet, but I put insulin up there. Insulin is what we have to get control of to be healthy, to maintain longevity, to basically do all the things that we want to do, and to mainly stave off those illnesses or things that are going to kill us that I talked about in the last video. Cardiovascular disease and stroke, cancer, and neurodegenerative diseases, which is Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. A website I want everybody to go to, and I want you to bookmark it. It's called lowenergydiet.com. It's from Dr. Ted Naiman, and he's the author of a book called The PE Diet. I would also recommend that you pick this book up. The reason I like this website, it's very good with its infographics, and it basically shows you what you should be eating. Not what you shouldn't be eating, but it basically shows you in pictorial form what the goal is and what you should be eating. So I think it's really good. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to describe and I'm going to show you basically what I show every patient that comes into the clinic on a consult. I'm going to go through why insulin is the 800-pound gorilla and why we have to get control of it. So I'm going to erase this, so bear with me for just a second. Okay, so we're still talking diet and nutrition. Okay, so if this is a cell, okay, that's a cell. We have trillions of cells in our body. These cells have within them what's called a mitochondria. It's an organelle within the cell. Some cells have thousands and thousands of these mitochondria. What the mitochondria does is it produces energy in the form of what's called ATP. So it's very, very important. So mitochondria, and I'm a huge proponent of mitochondrial medicine. I think mitochondria are basically very intelligent. I think a lot of what happens within our bodies has to do with these mitochondria. But from a basic standpoint, when you're looking at energy, basically when you breathe, you take in oxygen. That oxygen is taken up and it goes to the mitochondria. Now this mitochondria, basically it acts like a factory. So this factory needs substrate, it needs fuel. So when you eat a meal, so say for example you eat a pasta dish that has chicken, it's got your pasta, and then it's got a butter sauce, which is gonna have fat. That's gonna have all three of your macronutrients. So protein, carbohydrates, and fat. The protein, your body wants to use protein structurally. Muscle, bone, skin. Your body never really wants to use protein for energy. It's very inefficient, and you really only see that in starvation states. As long as you have some fat on your body, you're really not going to burn protein. And most of us have plenty of fat on our body. All right, so in this particular meal, you had both carbohydrate and fat in this meal that can be used for energy. If carbohydrate's available, your body's always going to use that first for energy. So this carbohydrate is taken up by the cell, goes to the mitochondria. It's going to be the substrate to produce energy. The fat that you had in this meal is going to be blocked from entering the cell. There's an enzyme that's blocked that doesn't allow the fat in there. And the fat is going to go to your fat cells as a storage form of energy. So a good way to think about this, 1,000 years ago when food wasn't readily available, when food was available, we ate, we gorged, and we got a little bit fat. Because invariably you were going to go maybe a week or more without any food, any real food. When that happened, we would use this storage form of energy. The fat would come out of the fat cells and we'd use that for energy. Problem is, we don't really ever have to fast anymore, especially in our Western society. So this system becomes not as efficient as it used to be. Okay, another thing that happens. As soon as you eat that pasta, an organ called the pancreas secretes insulin. Okay, one of insulin's jobs is to attach to the cell at a receptor and basically to open a trap door to allow glucose from the carbohydrates into the cell. That's why a type 1 diabetic who can't make insulin will have very high glucose levels because they can't get the insulin into the cell. So that's one of insulin's jobs. Insulin has other jobs though. Insulin also affects the fat cell in the sense that when insulin's elevated, it blocks fat from exiting the fat cell and it increases fat going into the fat cell. Again, body's super smart. Body realizes that if insulin levels are high, that must mean that we've eaten, that now we're in storage mode. So if we're in storage mode, we want to increase fat. So insulin helps us do that. Okay, next thing that happens, you have an organ called the liver. If, and you always will have, if you have excess glucose, more than what you need for energy, your body does not want that excess glucose circulating. So your body will take that excess glucose and convert it to fat. It's called de novo lipogenesis. That fat will get transported to your fat cells as triglycerides. So, oftentimes if I see a very high triglyceride level on a patient, there are certain genetic reasons that triglycerides can be elevated. But by and large, usually when triglycerides are very elevated, that tells me that somebody's eating a lot of carbohydrates. And those carbohydrates are having to get converted to triglycerides. And one of the big offenders of this is drinking glucose. So that could be in the form of sweet tea, that could be soft drinks. Juices are really bad. Orange juice, any of the juices, apple juice, will cause a big surge in glucose, and a lot of that glucose will get converted to triglycerides. So one of the primary things I tell people, if you do nothing at all, please do not consume glucose in the form of a liquid. And like I said, sweet tea, soft drinks, all of those are very, very bad and damaging for you. Okay, so now we kind of have a bigger picture. Now, one of the things that happens, these fat cells have a tremendous amount of control in the body. And everybody has what's called a personal fat threshold. Basically, that means how fat you can get, how much subcutaneous fat you can use to store all of this fat that you're eating and the fat that you're making from excess carbohydrates. So some people can really make fat very well, or their fat cells can expand very well. So some patients that are 500 pounds or greater may be fairly metabolically healthy in the sense that they're not diabetic, and because they're able to keep storing fat. On the flip side of that, certain people, like people from Asia, like Indians from Asia, they have a hard time getting fat. And because of that, their fat cells basically reach their max quickly. And when that happens, there's no place to store this extra fat. So when they adopt our diet, essentially, and they're eating a lot of fat and they're eating a lot of carbohydrate, that fat has to go somewhere. So it starts being deposited in the liver and the pancreas, visceral fat, which is very damaging. And when these fat cells overexpand, they begin to secrete inflammatory substances like cytokines and things like that are very damaging to the body. And when this happens, insulin levels begin to rise also, because one of insulin's jobs is to shove fat in these fat cells. So insulin starts to rise and it can become very high. And when that happens, it becomes very hard to lose weight, because if insulin levels are chronically high, then essentially what happens is it makes it, because one of insulin's jobs is to keep fat in these fat cells and to keep trying to push fat in the fat cells. So insulin becomes incredibly important in what we're going to do to try to be healthier. And principally, one of the principal things we're going to do is to try to decrease these insulin levels. Okay, so now we're at the point where everybody says, okay, doc, you've told me that insulin's not good. Got it. So how do I decrease insulin levels? There's really two main ways of decreasing insulin levels. One, you have to decrease your consumption of carbohydrates and sugar. I mean, that's just one way to do it. I recommend generally to try to keep your carbs at 50 grams or less. The second way to do this is fasting protocols. I really like fasting protocols. I use a number of them here in the clinic. I almost always start with what's called intermittent fasting. And essentially all that means is you're eating all of your food in a day in a window of about 8 hours. And then you're fasting for roughly 16 to 18 hours. That's what I do. I eat dinner at night around 6 p.m. I don't eat again until the next day around 11 or 12 o'clock the next day. So I fast somewhere around 16 to 18 hours. And I watch my carbohydrates. If you do those two things alone, and no, absolutely do not drink any form of glucose, sweet teas, soft drinks, or juices. If you'll do those three things, you'll be well on the way to better health. And that's pretty much where we start here at Personalized Wellness. We'll start with these measures. We'll give that 30 days to 60 days, and we'll see what happens. At that point, if you're still having difficulty losing fat, then we'll juggle it and do something a bit different. The other thing that I highly recommend, and I would say this is number 4, is I really recommend increasing protein. I like somewhere around a gram per pound of lean body mass. So for me, that's somewhere around 160 grams of protein a day. Most people would say that's way too much. But I can tell you, if we maximize protein, and another kind of hack is make sure our minerals are adequate: magnesium, potassium, zinc. If we do that, you're very much, you're more satiated than not. and it becomes much easier to decrease these carbohydrates. Okay, so that's the second video, and this is diet nutrition. I want everybody to watch this. Watch it once, maybe watch it twice. Come to the clinic during your consult and ask questions. And this is basically how we're going to get started here in the clinic. We have a lot of other things that we can do. We can add metformin to help with weight loss. There's peptides that can be used like Victoza. There's just a lot of other things that we can do to help with weight loss and diet and nutrition. But this is the start. Other fasting protocols, that sort of thing. So again, thank you. Thanks for watching this video. We look forward to seeing you in the clinic. And again, I'm Dr. Don Bond with Personalized Wellness. Thank you.